Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast. This is a weekly program focused on the relevant topics in Freemasonry and the various aspects of the craft. Any opinions, thoughts, or viewpoints shared during this program are that of the individual and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant, or concordant body from which that member may hail. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce. Excited to bring him on the podcast. I know you've been on for a Masonic talk, but he's a very close friend to the pod. Right Worshipful Daniel Di Natale.
Thank you for having me back.
Brother Dan is a member of Harmony Lodge number
699 OM, or Observant,
in the Erie District, and of course is deeply involved with what we are doing moving forward as far as the Grand Lodge and some of the work that's happening on our state level. And that's what we're going to be talking about here, is Masonry Moving Forward. That's the initiative that our Grand Master has put out, his vision. And now that we've heard about it, we've read about it in the Empire State Mason, the Grand Master is going around and speaking in lodges and sharing his vision with brothers. There's the work behind the scenes that gets done. So let's start first with what this means, how we're changing the mindset of how we're doing business in the fraternity.
This is an exciting time to be involved in Freemasonry in New York, and really, in my opinion, in Freemasonry in general, because New York is now going to start leading the way in a way that is innovative and in a way truly we have never done before. Inspired by the work of the Northern Masonic jurisdiction with Path Forward, the Grand Master, this is a long-term plan, and I know it's been sort of under wraps, and now you're going to start seeing the public side, all the work that we've been doing for the last really now 24 months, really since the pandemic kicked off and there was delays at the Grand Lodge, and now that we're back in line, we use that time that we were, forced to stay apart to organize the agenda in a different way with more planning time. And inspired by by Path Forward, we are now adopting a program called Path Forward. So New York is not just, you've heard in other podcasts, from the Grand Master talking about the new website and things like that. It's not just a website. The website is but a tool. We are changing the very way we do business as an organization. Our Path Forward is working with a leading brand development company to help us understand our brand, if you will, understand our messaging, both verbal and through images, and then how that information is then used within the organization and outside of it. We are working with our partners at Leadership and Educational Services. So a big part of our agenda is offerings brought to our membership. So you've heard a ton about the Maxwell School. You've heard a ton about Muni. So what's happening is our Path Forward really is the hub of all these changes. It isn't just a new logo. It isn't just a snappy catchphrase. It is a change in the way that we relate to our members, the value proposition that they get from our Grand Lodge, and the way that we relate to the broader membership and those looking at us as an organization from the outside. It is a dynamic method of doing business. We work, your teams like agile teams and things like that. In some respects, we operate like that. One of the biggest changes you'll see is in the way that Leadership and Educational Services is organized. So instead of having one person as the committee chair, there are three of us. You have Brother Ernest Hudson, who leads our leadership education and our partnership with the Maxwell School. You have Brother Robert Trzwacki, who's leading the education design programs that we have. So the relaunch of Muni and what that really looks like. And then myself as the administrative co-chair, who does, the day-to-day operations, contract negotiations, and all the shenanigans that make a Grand Lodge committee go. So it's exciting because all three of us bring something to the table. And frankly, we've never organized a committee like this at our Grand Lodge. We're making an active effort to say that if this is what leadership needs to be in order for us to be the example, then we need to be that example and show that leadership isn't one person. It's a synergistic team. And that's how Grand Master leads, and that's how his committees lead.
And this is the part that excited me. If you're a brother that's into leadership, business, culture, management, you're going to really dig this episode because that's where we're going. And it's amazing I always, share this analogy with folks is that most Blue Lodge Masons, we hear of Grand Lodge when the secretary has to read an edict or an announcement that comes during the communications during our meetings. It's also part of our dues. There's the Grand Lodge assessment. And we know that, historically there was the New York City Grand Lodge session. And for most Blue Lodge guys, that's pretty much all we ever heard about Grand Line. Grand Lodge. Sometimes you would have a Grand Line officer that would come and visit your area, kind of depending on where you are in the state. But, there were areas where you could go some time without seeing a representative from Grand Lodge in your jurisdiction or even in your lodge. So here's what's different. We're changing that. We're building this brand for New York Masonry. And Brother DiNatale is on the inside of this, but now we're taking an inside-out approach where you're also recruiting and looking for talents and skilled brothers that can bring something to help Grand Lodge, which for me is kind of a first in the time that I've been a member.
Absolutely. So one of the projects inside of our Path Forward is how we generate content and media. And now this partnership between Craftsman Online and our Grand Lodge of the State of New York and our Path Forward, and how this works. So like even the idea that a committee, a committeeman, right, is coming on anything to tell the brethren about what the committee's doing, how they're doing it. And really, I'm asking your ideas. I very much hope that from this podcast that brothers will reach out and say, hey, I didn't know you guys were doing that. This is a great idea. I like this. Or I like this, but I don't like that. Because none of this came out of a bubble. We worked within teams and pilot groups within, the agencies we hired, within our own services within Grand Lodge, the board that's actually working on this. So it isn't, just, me running out and doing stuff. There are groups of us involved in this at every level of leadership at the Grand Lodge, and then within our communities. And frankly, the teams that we work with outside through our vendors are not Masons. They're truth be told, our partners at Block Club, which is the brand agency that we're working with, every one of our project coordinators is a woman, and has given us a totally different perspective on the messaging that we've been using. They critique the words that we used, and we never even thought about it like that. I just got some brief information back, and one of their big critiques was, hey, this is a great message, but you got to be careful about the words you use, because these words may not mean what you think they mean today, or the word is too big and people don't know what it is. So they're going to skim right over it and miss your message. And they actually boiled down a statement of belief, an identity statement for us that I think nails it, but uses words that I guess we never thought that we needed to use. I'll give it to you. This is the first time anybody outside of the committee has seen this or heard it. And we're still working on it, but I think it nails it. So the identity statement of New York Masonry. So as New York Masons, we bring men of integrity together in brotherhood. Our common bond is the shared belief that every man can and should step into his best self and make a difference in the lives of others. Right? Simple, like exactly what we've been trying to say for years, right? But then we get bogged down in what we're trying to say, because as Masons, we're trying to tell our story, right? And we're trying to tell our story from our point of view, which is great. But we've never looked at our story and said, well, wait a second. As an insider, I'm telling an insider story. And the world may not be able to relate to that insider story because they're not inside yet. So how do we tell that story to outsiders? Or how do we tell that story to brothers that may just not know? How do we tell it? Well, that's what we're doing with our Path Forward, is telling our story on our terms, but understanding how we're telling that story so that it can be as impactful and as powerful as it is, but give us that impact and that power, because that's how important the message is.
I don't want to use the phrase that we're modernizing the craft, because we're really not. I think we're just getting more in line and evolving with how brands are interacting with people. I'm a big believer that we all have brands that we prefer. We expect that our brands that we do business with, these organizations, these products, these companies, that they have values that associate with our values. And that's why you see people driving around with Apple bumper stickers in their car, or swearing that, their droid is the best device on earth, or don't give me a Pepsi, I only ask for a Coke.
Coke Zero, please.
Yes. Yeah. As a marketing person, that's why hearing this is like, okay, we're starting to recognize there's a distinct difference between internal communications and external communications.
Well, and one of the things that was a big takeaway in looking at this is a lot of brothers don't hear this frankness from people involved within Grand Lodge. We're $1 billion organization. People do not realize the depth and scope that our Grand Lodge makes up and what we're truly the stewards of. It is not an embellishment. We are $1 billion organization in the world of fraternalism and not-for-profits. We're a big dog. But if you go to our website, if you look at our messaging, if you see some of the things that we've published in the past, you wouldn't guess that. We to the outsider looking in, we don't look like what we do. So once we were speaking with outsiders, again, I know this brand agency that really got into what we were doing, they're like, hearing what you're telling us and then showing what you have, right? Like materials from the inside, stuff that we got from the trustees, video shoots, brochures, messaging, things that we had used but never used widely. They're like, you guys are like, you're telling a story, but you're only telling part of the story. And the part of the story that you're telling is not the part that's compelling. You look at the care community, look at Japan, look at the library, look at New Rochelle, look at what's going to happen in Rochester. Like, these aren't little efforts. These are not little things that impact people. These are huge things. But then talk about the individual impact that the teachings give a Mason to then cause charity out into the world. They make a statement inside this that, actually, I'll read it to you. So I'm looking at the brand kit that was sent back as part of the work that we're doing So the way it works is the agency comes up with a brand guide, and that brand guide comes in pieces. So the first piece that we got is the verbal messaging. It's not the fun, like, visual messaging, the verbal stuff. And the verbal stuff is frankly far more important than the imagery, because everybody can identify to the square and compasses and what that does, right? What we don't have is that verbal messaging, as you saw. Right, the elevator, which you just heard, right? That's actually how they labeled it. They said this, use this as an elevator pitch. When somebody, we give the old adage, we take good men, we make them better through a veiled system of allegory, and right?
What does that even begin to mean?
Yeah. What is a veiled system of allegory? Are you telling me you're telling me that you're going to teach me through a secret that you can't tell me, and then you're going to tell me that you can't tell me that? Like that? Like,
you mean like you're going to do this through sheets?
Right. That's a word that no one knows, right? I just went through this, and not to blow like the secrets of the universe, but we just did a first degree and we talked about a hollow. And I'm like, all right, guys, if somebody asks you what a hollow is, it's just where your foot meets your ankle. I'm like, well, why didn't you just say that? I just did. But I never thought about the words we use. And every organization has lingo in it, right? But we got to be careful, right, about the lingo we use, because sometimes that lingo can actually hurt us because we don't realize the message we're giving is being washed away in the words that we used. I teach salespeople, and I teach them how to speak. And I know that in my professional life, never applied that inside of Masonry. And now that I'm looking at this from an outsider looking in, starting to apply that as to how we relate things. But
the other thing that's special about what we're working on here as well is we're connecting the brethren. And I know that people are going, connecting, you mean like using technology? So yeah, there's that. That's one application. That would be a fair definition of it. But the other thing is that you're going back to that newly made, and in some cases newly raised Mason, that is their Masonic universe, their Masonic world, is their lodge, maybe their jurisdiction, that's their bubble. And now you're saying, hey, there are lodges all across the state. There are over 33,000 men who are just like you, who are part of this in New York State alone. And here's what makes this special, because here's all these other things that we do that you might hear as programs during your meetings. But now when you're out and you're talking about what is Freemasonry, you can mention all of this stuff and not worry about the veiled allegory pitch that we give people.
And like even our core values, right? Our core principles, brotherly love, relief, and truth. Those are the core principles of Freemasonry. Have you ever really been messaged that? Like, I've been a Mason for 15 years. Outside of the degrees, I've never heard these repeated. And then when you go to our friends at the Scottish Rite, and you have them like outwardly say, this is what we believe and why we believe it.
Right.
I'm a Mason. Why am I not? Where is that message for us within our craft lodges? So brotherly love, relief, and truth isn't a secret. It's our identity. It's what we are. So, I mean, when we look at how to define these, right? So brotherly love. Fraternity is our backbone and our lifeline. We sustain each other with unwavering support, push each other towards excellence, care for each other's loved ones in times of need, and embrace our many differences. Wow. Relief. We cannot grow as individuals or as brothers if we let those around us fall. Acts of charity, community service, and good deeds are expressions of our love for humanity and a path to self-improvement. And I've always been a big believer that though charity is a great thing, right? We're not a charitable organization. Charity is the byproduct of the lessons that we teach and learn and the example that good men must give. Belief by this definition or by the statement makes that statement. And that's so important to me because that's actually the teaching in Masonry. Truth. Wisdom is a precursor to excellence. That's a good one. We are steadfast in our pursuit of education and the free and open exchange of ideas in order to gain the knowledge and insight we need to be better leaders, community members, and countrymen. So, I mean, I think it's important in this day and age. And we talk here, the Grandmaster in past podcasts, talk about the dispelling of ignorance. As Freemasons, that's like a thing, like a 300-year-old tradition. Like dispelling ignorance and standing against those things which work against the common lot, that hurt the common man and work against our common good. That is like, I can't go through it right now, but I can think of, 250 years of examples of how that works. And to make that statement that this to us is our definition of what truth means to us as Masons is important, not just the outside world, but to the inside. Because often these points get argued and, the Grand Lodge at a point needs to say, hey, this is our principle. These are our guiding lights. And I don't know a Mason that could disagree with any of those statements because it literally is everything we believe.
And this is the fun part, too. Working in organizations, as I like to say, the building of the brand, the getting it started, the letting the organization know, like, hey, this is you and you control this and you make this awesome. And we're just helping give the words and shape this, but this is your work. And to see people's eyes like explode and go like, yeah, that's, right now for a lot of brothers listening to this podcast like me, this is like finding out that the new iPhone is actually worth that price because it's better. Or the new version of the Chevy truck is better than the previous model. And now I get it and I get to drive it. So how are brothers going to start seeing all of this new branding, these new resources, these new materials?
Sure.
How's that messaging going to come out?
From the L&E standpoint, you're going to start seeing things pretty quick. We just signed the agreement with the Maxwell School. We are actually sending the first wave of coaches to the Maxwell School in March. They will then come back as certified Maxwell trainers, and we'll be able to teach the Core 6. So the Core 6 are the Maxwell programs that are able to be taught by a coach. They'll be able to do that as soon as they get back. They get access to all the resources and tools. Brother Hudson is quite possibly one of the most motivated people I've ever met in my life, and also one of the most organized. As soon as he heard that this was the crazy plan we were going to give him, and then I broke the news to him that we literally have nothing and you're going to build it, he did. So sometimes brothers get a little like, oh, is that for real? Is that what we're doing? And I've had that conversation.
Hit pause for just a second on this, Dan, because I think there might be some brothers that are a little out of the loop, like Syracuse University, Maxwell School. Wait a second. I'm going to start getting college credit available to me as a Master Mason.
So Maxwell School, what it does is provides you with something, not so much college credit, but it does provide you with a real certification that is usable in industry.
So college level learning.
Oh yeah, easily. Not college credits, like an outside certification course, but like my boss at work, right? I work for a large regional bank. I was talking to my boss, and he's Maxwell certified. He's a Maxwell coach, and I was telling him, oh yeah, I'm doing this stuff with Maxwell, and I'm getting certification. And he's like, oh my gosh, yeah. He goes, I've been a Maxwell coach for years. He goes, it's changed my career. He's like, it's real training that's applicable to real life. It's applicable to your job. It's applicable to how you work in your community. For those brothers that are involved in faith communities, they'll recognize Maxwell immediately because he doesn't just work with industry. He's a preacher, and his training really came out of the work he did in churches in those communities of faith. So a lot of the brothers that may know of him got exposed to him at church, and then other brothers might recognize him from the corporate side of things. So it's interesting how it all kind of intersects. Some other brothers might recognize him from Shrine International. Shrine International actually used some of his coursework to train their sets of leaders. So what we're doing is an industry thing. It isn't just like cool Grand Lodge is going out and doing something. This is John Maxwell. This is a big deal. Grand Lodge is spending time, money, and energy. Like this isn't just like, oh, cool, here's a book and read it. The trustees of the Grand Lodge of the state of New York are paying to get this training to our coaches so they can come back to the grand jurisdiction and certify you so that you can take the core 6 classes and then use that to not just improve your Masonic life, but to improve your life as in industry. You could put this on your resume. Like, it's a real thing. It's not something we're making up. This is an industry standard, and it's a big one.
That's a major value add for men that every year go, what do I get out of my Masonic membership? And I hope brothers don't think about that when their dues come and they have to, cut that check or transfer that money. But this is something that, I don't want to make light of this. Like, when you share just this component of our path forward, I was like, we're going to start making leaders.
And then this partner, we're actually exploring a partnership now with the with the Council of Deliberation, with the Scottish Rite, Northern Masonic jurisdiction here in New York. They have Excelsior. They're doing some things with leadership where there's going to be some synergy within, probably not the initial launch, but I would say within probably a year and a half, you're going to start seeing some synergy between our program and that being offered by the Scottish Rite. And as I hope all of you have listened to the Grand Masters podcast that came before. I believe it probably launched a week or two before this one. The Scottish Rite is going to offer this in some capacity back. So you're seeing these walls break down where we used to see some like siloing of concordant bodies and talent. That doesn't make any sense. We're one organization at the end of the day. We're one grand jurisdiction. We're one group of brothers, and we either rise or fall together. And frankly, there's not enough of us to try to silo off and hope it all works out. If we work together, my God, imagine the things that will change with the resources and tools we have throughout all organizations.
Another thing that's new about Grand Lodge too is the messaging and the reference point. And we went from a me to a we mindset. Tell us more about the we and the Our Grand Lodge initiative.
Yeah, so you're going to see through a lot of the publications that come out, at least from our path forward, is a change in the way in which we message about our Grand Lodge. So you've heard me say our Grand Lodge this entire thing. That was a conscious effort. That's part of the messaging. And it's not verbal jujitsu. I'm not trying to trick you, right? But it's the way in which we relate a message. And that message is that Grand Lodge for too long has been thought of as an obstruction, a power of, abstracted from us, and something that doesn't provide anything. And that's simply never been true. But because the messaging has not matched the reality, people believe it. And unfortunately, with what's going on in the greater fraternity, we really can't do that anymore. We have to rise together or completely fall. And I don't want to be like the dire message from Daniel Di Natale, but the truth of the matter is, if we don't all work together, Freemasonry across the country is on a precipice. So if we don't work together and understand that this really is ours, like Grand Lodge exists because of us and is empowered because of us, all of us, from the Grand Masters, the individual Master of the Lodge, the apprentice in the northeast corner of the Lodge, all of us together make this stuff possible. And for too long, I think we've looked at it the other way. You've heard messages, through Grand Master's speeches and whatnot, the idea that trickle down and top down doesn't work. And that's never been his mentality. And it's never been mine either. The only way to win is together from a very bottom up. The individual lodges are what make this place go. And then they produce leaders that then lead their districts. And those districts produce leaders that then lead our Grand Lodge. And if we're not going to be investing in the individual brother in the lodge, then what did you expect to get? What kind of leaders did you expect to find? Did you expect to find them by accident? I heard a quote, John Maxwell quote, the man on the top of the hill didn't fall there.
Nice. And now, at least in our light, he doesn't have to die there anymore either.
Indeed, he does not.
He'll have a band of brothers around him.
Right.
There's so much energy that comes with change in, for lack of a better term, the administration or the grand line in our organization, where every 2 years we have an election and there's, a change in that. And some of the changes, I think our brothers are still trying to figure out, okay, what's going on, especially when it comes to Grand Lodge sessions. I was wondering if you could give us a little insight as to, are we still going to be doing the May in New York City and what would be discussed there? And then are we still going to have the fall in Utica and what would possibly be outlined?
To my understanding, yes. The need for a pomp and circumstance type Grand Lodge session and the need for a legislative session where it's a little more accessible seems to be the direction that we're going as an organization. Now, do I know that's for sure? No, I don't know that's for sure because there's a pandemic going on. I have no idea what the future's going to hold. None of us do. But the general attitude and the understanding that I've gotten from leadership, the senior leadership in our organization is, yeah, that is the intention. And I think that has empowered a lot of brothers. I think at the session we had in October, I think it was well attended, not just because it was in Utica and not just because it was the pandemic and brothers needed to go there to vote. I think people came because it was just, frankly, a lot more accessible. It's a lot easier to go to a session that's $400 than going to New York City for some of these lodges and $2,000-$3,000 depending on where you're at.
I think a lot of us that have gone in the past, now will recognize the honor that it is in being there to attend and to vote, and there will be a difference. And I think a lot of us will be looking to see not only what the Grand Master's message and his address, but when he hits the play button and we start to see the commercials and the website and the new rollout. Is that something that we can expect?
Yeah, we're hoping. So the website's a little ways off. It actually is a monstrous project, far larger than I anticipated. This whole project is easily the largest non-construction project the Grand Lodge has ever undertaken. It isn't just a website. It isn't just a brand. It's everything in some capacity. Everything we touch as individual brothers in some capacity is getting touched and looked at in the next, year and a half. And I think the brothers got to realize none of this stuff comes out instantly. We got like 2.5 years to go, guys.
I think some of the voice of the change you're talking about is for the brothers that are listening is be prepared. Your role is no longer going to be a passive one. That Grand Lodge is going to engage and expect for you to become engaged with what's happening. Be a difference maker.
Absolutely. I mean, that was when they asked when we were in one of the meetings, they asked me if your brand could inspire anything, what would you want it to inspire? And I said, I would want it to inspire hope. I would want brothers to look at this and know that they could make a difference. And I'd want the community to look at us and understand that the impossible is possible and that there are those amongst us who will do the right thing because it's the right thing.
This has been the Craftsman Online Podcast. I want to thank my guest this week because he needs you. Right Worshipful Daniel Di Natale. Thanks for coming on. If Masonic education is important to you, you can visit us online at craftsmanonline.com. A reminder that new episodes of our podcast are available for download every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.